The Lost City of Atlantis is one of the most famous lost civilizations in history. We know about it today because of an ancient Greek philosopher named Plato who lived in Athens around 360 BC in his philosophical works. He told a story of a great and powerful nation that had existed more than 9,000 years before his time. According to what he wrote, Atlantis was an actual place, larger than both modern Libya and Asia. The Atlanteans were said to have been a major naval power with colonies all over the Mediterranean, including places like the Strait of Gibraltar, where they established a stronghold known as the Pillars of Hercules. Plato claimed that the Atlanteans were gifted by the gods with wisdom and strength, but they became greedy and corrupt, so the gods destroyed them. Their great city sank beneath the waves in a single day and night, and not a trace of it remains above the water today. Was it real? For centuries after Plato wrote about Atlantis, people believed it was real. But then later on, some began to claim that it was nothing but a fictional character in one of Plato's stories. Even today, almost 25 centuries later, historians and archaeologists are still trying to figure out which version is correct. What we do know is that there was definitely something to Plato's story. If there wasn't, why would he have gone to such detailed lengths describing this lost civilization? Also, other ancient writers besides Plato referenced a lost civilization just like his. There was a historian named Pausanias who wrote of Atlantis being swallowed by the sea. Then there was the Roman philosopher Pliny the Elder, who also mentioned it. This means there was probably at least some truth to the story. But what exactly was it? The Egyptian connection. Some researchers believe the lost city of Atlantis may have actually been Egypt. Of course, this is highly unlikely considering Egypt is still there. But it could have been possible that Atlantis was Egypt before Egypt became Egypt. If you go back far enough, Egypt wasn't even called Egypt. It was called Kemet, and it was ruled by a different dynasty of kings. Maybe Plato made a mistake when he said Atlantis was completely wiped from existence. Maybe he only meant that it had been underwater for a very long time. If this is true, then Egypt and Atlantis could be one and the same thing. This is further supported by the fact that Plato claimed Atlantis was home to many unique inventions, including machines capable of harnessing the power of fire. Ancient Egyptians were masters of engineering and technology, especially when it came to harnessing the power of fire. They created tools out of bronze and iron, which they used to dig canals, build huge temples, and construct the pyramids. So it's entirely possible that Plato confused Egypt with Atlantis and the Great Flood. Another theory is that Plato's Atlantis didn't actually sink into the ocean, but rather it was destroyed in the biblical Great Flood. According to Genesis, the Great Flood covered the whole earth. Only Noah and his family survived inside the ark. All other human beings died when the waters receded. The land was left empty, and it was several hundred years before people began populating the earth once again. Researchers suggest that this Great Flood is likely what Plato was referring to when he talked about Atlantis sinking beneath the waves. This is also supported by the fact that many cultures around the world have myths and legends of a great flood that happened in the distant past. It seems that the biblical story isn't the only one where a great disaster wiped out all life on the planet. Perhaps the destruction of Atlantis was nothing more than a misunderstanding between Plato and the people he spoke with. He might have gotten his stories mixed up. Atlantis as a moral tale. As we've already discussed, Plato was a philosopher. He wasn't necessarily a historian. His goal wasn't to document facts. Instead, he wanted to teach people how to live their lives. Many of his stories contained deep lessons, and he often used simple stories and parables to deliver those lessons. It is entirely possible that his story about Atlantis was nothing more than a way to convey a message about greed and corruption. After all, in the story, Atlantis is punished by the gods for becoming too greedy and corrupt. This is a classic teaching method. Plato was familiar with this. He used stories like this all the time. A false memory. There's also the possibility that Plato simply remembered the wrong things. He may have met someone who told him stories about an ancient civilization that was lost. He may have spoken with sailors who witnessed the destruction of a port city, but he remembered these details incorrectly. Plato's stories about Atlantis include descriptions of strange animals and plants, as well as mentions of mystical springs and magical lands. He even wrote about crystal structures taller than pyramids. All these details are completely at odds with the physical laws of nature. It's safe to say that Atlantis wasn't filled with talking trees and fountains of magic. This means either Plato was misinformed or he dreamed up these fantastical details on his own. No evidence. One of the biggest reasons why most experts today do you want to believe in Atlantis is because there is no evidence. Aside from what Plato wrote down, there is literally nothing. He was the only person to ever write about Atlantis. He was the only one to ever describe its geography, its culture, its people, its architecture, or its art. This is strange, considering how much Plato emphasized how large and influential the Atlanteans were. They must have left behind some kind of evidence. Right, something, but there's nothing. To make matters worse, there are no archaeological sites that match Plato's description of Atlantis. He said the city was surrounded by walls and towers, and yet no one has ever found any ancient ruins that could possibly be it. To top it all off, no artifacts have ever been found that can be linked back to Atlantis. The odds of all these things happening to be true are astronomically low. Recent discoveries, in spite of the lack of evidence, researchers continue to search for the lost city of Atlantis. Some believe it really did exist, and they're just a few archaeological digs away from proving it. In recent years, exciting discoveries have fueled the debate over whether or not Atlantis was real. For example, in 2013, an underwater pyramid was discovered off the coast of the Egyptian city of Alexandria. At first, many believed this was the lost pyramid of Poseidon mentioned by Plato. Unfortunately, further investigation revealed the structure was likely part of a harbor built by Alexander. Great other researchers have focused on islands in the Atlantic Ocean, such as the Canary Islands, Madeira, and the Azores. Some researchers even think Atlantis was located in Antarctica. The theory goes that Atlantis was once a thriving civilization until the continent shifted, causing the temperature to drop to unbearable levels and forcing the Atlanteans to flee. While fun to consider, none of these theories have been proven. The Judgment of Paris, according to Plato's story, Atlantis was destroyed in a single day and night. But what caused the end of Atlantis? Apparently, the Atlanteans grew greedy and corrupt, and the gods were forced to punish them. Plato claims the gods were so disgusted by the behavior of the Atlanteans, they unleashed a great earthquake, which was followed by massive floods. These floods destroyed the entire city and sank it into the ocean. It was a judgment from the gods. Where in the world? If Atlantis really did exist, it's obvious that its location would be one of the most important pieces of evidence. Experts have proposed all kinds of ideas about where it could have been. Some believe it was near the Strait of Gibraltar, while others think it was off the coast of North Africa or somewhere in the Aegean Sea. There are even theories suggesting it was somewhere in the Arctic Circle. If researchers can pinpoint where Atlantis was located, they'll be one step closer to proving it was a real place. Then they can start searching for artifacts and piecing together what life was like for the Atlanteans thousands of years ago. Thanks for watching. Which theory do you think is true? Let me know in the comments below.